Step into the art of Poirot, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot masters the craft of mystery. In the shadowed halls of Ivory House, a priceless ivory statuette vanishes under a locked glass case, and a loyal butler lies dead at the foot of a grand staircase, a blood-stained candlestick beside him. Who stole the treasure? Why was the butler silenced? As secrets unravel and lies crumble, only Hercule Poirot's little grey cells can pierce the web of deceit. Step into a world of elegance, betrayal, and a shocking truth that will keep you guessing until the final reveal. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Ivory House. The late autumn sun cast a pale golden glow over the rolling lawns of Ivory House, a sprawling Georgian manor nestled in the heart of the Sussex countryside. Its ivy-clad walls and tall chimneys stood resolute against the chill October breeze, a picture of timeless elegance. Yet beneath the polished veneer of the estate, a quiet unease simmered, as though the very stones of the house anticipated the storm to come. It was October 12th, 1925, and the guests had gathered for what their host, Sir Reginald Ashbourne, called a modest weekend retreat. The invitations, penned in Sir Reginald's meticulous hand, promised fine dining, intellectual conversation, and a chance to admire his latest acquisition, an exquisite ivory statuette from the Orient, said to be worth a small fortune. The statuette, a delicate carving of a crane in mid-flight, was the talk of the county, its rumoured history steeped in mystery and whispered curses. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend of Hercule Poirot, stood in the grand entrance hall, his suitcase at his feet, adjusting his tie with a touch of self-consciousness. The hall was a marvel of polished oak and gleaming chandeliers, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes gazing down upon their descendants. Hastings, a man of straightforward tastes, felt a pang of unease amid such opulence. He had come at Poirot's insistence, for the little Belgian detective had received a curious note from Sir Reginald, hinting at a matter of some delicacy, requiring his unique talents. Poirot, however, had not yet arrived, delayed by a late train from London. The guests milled about, their voices a soft hum against the crackle of the fire in the drawing-room. Sir Reginald, a tall man of 50 with a neatly trimmed beard and piercing blue eyes, held court with practised charm. His wife, Lady Beatrice, a delicate woman with a strained smile, moved among the guests, her silk gown rustling like whispers. Their daughter, Eleanor, a spirited young woman of 22, hovered near the grand piano, her dark curls catching the firelight as she laughed with a young man in a sharp intellect. Beside him stood Miss Sylvia Trent, a quiet governess employed by the Ashbournes to tutor their young ward Timothy, Sir Reginald's nephew. Timothy, a pale boy of 12, lurked in the shadows, his eyes wide with the curiosity of youth. The final guest, Mr. Victor Langston, a brusque businessman with a penchant for cigars, paced near the French windows, his gaze fixed on the darkening gardens. His presence seemed to unsettle Lady Beatrice, whose fingers tightened around her glass whenever he drew near. Hastings, ever observant in his own way, noted the undercurrents of tension, the fleeting glances, the forced smiles, the way Eleanor's laughter faltered when her father mentioned the statuette. Dinner was announced at precisely 7 o'clock, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under candlelight. The meal was lavish: roast pheasant, glazed vegetables, and a fine claret. But the conversation felt stilted, as though each guest guarded a secret. Sir Reginald spoke at length about the ivory crane, describing its intricate craftsmanship and hinting at its mysterious origins. "Some say it brings fortune," he said, his voice low, "and others ruin." Mrs. Whitmore leaned forward, her eyes alight with curiosity. "Is it true, Sir Reginald, that the statuette once belonged to a Maharaja who met an untimely end?" Sir Reginald's smile was tight. "Stories, Mrs. Whitmore, mere stories, though I confess its beauty is almost hypnotic." Eleanor, seated beside Julian Carver, shivered. "I wish you wouldn't talk of it, Father. It gives me the creeps." "Nonsense, my dear," Lady Beatrice interjected, her voice brittle. "It's just a trinket." The conversation shifted, but Hastings noted the way Victor Langston's gaze lingered on the statuette, displayed on a velvet cushion in a glass case at the room's far end. Dr. Grayson, meanwhile, seemed preoccupied, his fork pausing mid-air as he stared into his wineglass. Miss Trent, ever watchful, whispered something to young Timothy, who nodded solemnly. As the meal drew to a close, a sharp cry echoed from the hallway. The guests froze, their eyes darting to Sir Reginald, who rose with a frown. "Excuse me," he said, striding towards the door. Moments later he returned, his face ashen. "The statuette," he stammered. "It's gone." A murmur rippled through the room. Hastings, his heart quickening, scanned the faces around the table. Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her throat. Eleanor gasped, clutching Julian's unbroken. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Hastings, his mind racing, thought of Poirot. Where was the little Belgian when he was needed most? The theft of the statuette was no mere trifle. It was the spark that would ignite a far greater mystery, one that would test the limits of even Hercule Poirot's formidable intellect. As the clock struck 8, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows of Ivory House. The stage was set. The players assembled, and the game, as Poirot would later say, had begun. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. The air in Ivory House grew thick with unease as the guests absorbed Sir Reginald Ashburn's announcement. The theft of the ivory statuette, a treasure so proudly displayed only moments ago, had cast a pall over the elegant dining room. The candles flickered, throwing long shadows across the mahogany table, and the silence that followed was broken only by the distant howl of the October wind. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the foot of the table, felt a prickle of foreboding. This was no ordinary theft, he thought, and the absence of Hercule Poirot made the moment all the more unsettling. Sir Reginald, his face a mask of controlled fury, stood at the head of the table, his hands gripping the back of his chair. "This is an outrage," he said, his voice low but trembling with intensity. "That statuette is not merely valuable, it is irreplaceable. Whoever took it is still among us, for no one has left this house." Lady Beatrice, her delicate features pinched, rose to her feet. "Reginald, surely you don't suspect our guests?" Her voice wavered, betraying a nervousness that Hastings found curious. She glanced toward Victor Langston, whose heavy brows were knit in a scowl, then quickly looked away. "Someone must have seen something," Eleanor Ashbourne said, her dark eyes flashing as she scanned the room. The case was in plain view all through dinner. How could anyone take it without being noticed? Julian Carver, the young barrister, leaned forward, his tone measured. "Miss Ashbourne has a point. The dining-room doors were closed, and the servants were in the kitchen. The thief would have needed to act quickly and silently. Mrs. Clara Whitmore, the novelist, closed her notebook with a snap. "A bold move," she murmured, her eyes glinting with the thrill of a story unfolding. Almost as if the thief wanted to be noticed. Dr. Lionel Grayson cleared his throat, his ruddy cheeks regaining some color. "Perhaps we should search the house," he suggested. "It's possible the statuette was misplaced, not stolen." "Misplaced?" Victor Langston's voice was a growl. "A locked case doesn't open it."
Her arm around young Timothy, whose wide eyes darted from face to face. The boy's silence was unnerving, as though he saw more than he let on. Before the discussion could escalate, a piercing scream shattered the tension. It came from the hallway, sharp and raw, followed by a heavy thud. The guests froze, then surged toward the door, Hastings among them. Sir Reginald led the way, his long strides carrying him into the dimly lit corridor. There, crumpled at the foot of the grand staircase, lay Mr. Gordon Blake, the butler. His face was ashen, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A thin trickle of blood seeped from a wound at the base of his skull, staining the polished floor. Lady Beatrice gasped, clutching her husband's arm, while Eleanor stifled a cry. Mrs. Whitmore's pen was out again, scribbling furiously, though her hands trembled. Dr. Grayson knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse. After a moment he looked up, his expression grim. "He's dead," he said quietly. "A blow to the head, I'd wager." This was no fall. The word hung in the air. Murder. Hastings felt a chill run through him. The theft of the statuette had been a spark. This was the blaze. He glanced at the faces around him, Sir Reginald's tight jaw, Lady Beatrice's pallor, Eleanor's wide-eyed shock, Julian's calculating frown, Langston's clenched fists, and Mrs. Whitmore's barely concealed excitement. Miss Trent had pulled Timothy behind her, shielding him from the sight, but the boy's gaze was fixed on the body, unblinking. "Who could have done this?" Lady Beatrice whispered, her voice breaking. "Gordon has been with us for years." "Perhaps," Julian Carver said, his tone sharp. "The same person who took the statuette. The timing is too convenient." Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. "We must telephone the police at once, and no one leaves this house until they arrive." Hastings stepped forward, his mind racing. "If I may, Sir Reginald, I suggest we preserve the scene. My friend, Hercule Poirot, will be arriving soon. He has a particular talent for unraveling such matters." "Poirot?" Victor Langston snorted. "Some foreign detective?" "We need the local constabulary, not a parlor trickster." Hastings bristled but held his tongue. He knew Poirot's methods would prove Langston wrong, but for now the priority was order. "At the very least," he said, "we should note where everyone was when the scream was heard. It may help." Sir Reginald nodded curtly. "Very well. Let's return to the dining room and account for ourselves."
Weapon, perhaps. But why leave it in plain sight? As the group reconvened, Sir Reginald took charge. At 7:50, when the theft was discovered, we were all in the dining room, correct? Nods and murmurs of agreement followed, though Hastings noted Miss Trent's hesitation. "And after," he prompted, "who left the room before the scream?" "I stepped out to check on the servants," Lady Beatrice said quickly, "but only for a moment, just before 8. "I went to fetch my cigar case," Langston admitted, his tone gruff. "I was in the drawing room, alone." Eleanor's voice was soft. I slipped out to the powder room. I wasn't gone long. Julian Carver raised a hand. I stayed at the table, as did Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Grayson, and Miss Trent with Timothy. Mrs. Whitmore nodded. I was writing. I didn't move. Dr. Grayson adjusted his glasses. Nor I. Miss Trent's voice was barely audible. Timothy and I were here. He was upset about the statuette. Hastings scribbled the alibis in his notebook, his mind already piecing together the timeline. The scream had come at 8 o'clock precisely, according to the dining room clock. The murder must have occurred moments before, in the brief window when some guests were absent. But why kill the butler? And what linked his death to the missing statuette? As the guests exchanged wary glances, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. Sir Reginald's butler, no, Hastings corrected himself, the late butler's assistant, hurried to answer it. Moments later, a familiar figure stepped into the dining room, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his mustache impeccably waxed. "Mon ami Hastings!" Hercule Poirot exclaimed, his green eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I arrive, and already there is chaos. Tell me, what has occurred in this so charming ivory house?" Hastings exhaled, relief flooding him. The little gray cells had arrived, and with them, the hope of untangling the dark web that had ensnared them all. Chapter 3. The Little Gray Cells Stir. The dining room of Ivory House seemed to brighten with the arrival of Hercule Poirot, as though his very presence banished some of the shadows that clung to the gathering. The diminutive Belgian detective stood just inside the doorway, his neat black suit immaculate, his hands clasped behind his back, and his sharp green eyes sweeping over the assembled guests. The air, thick with suspicion and the lingering shock of Mr. Gordon Blake's murder, seemed to pause, as if awaiting his command. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt a familiar surge of confidence. Poirot was here, and the tangled threads of this mystery would soon be unraveled by his meticulous mind. Sir Reginald Ashbourne stepped forward, his face a mixture of relief.
Tonight, Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "Sir Reginald, I am most sorry to hear of your distress. Captain Hastings has telephoned me, and I understand there has been a theft, and now, hélas, a murder. Please, tell me all." The guests, still seated around the long mahogany table, exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Beatrice dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, while Eleanor Ashburn gripped Julian Carver's hand tightly. Victor Langston lit another cigar, his scowl deepening, and Mrs. Clara Whitmore's pen hovered over her notebook, poised to capture every word. Dr. Lionel Grayson adjusted his glasses, his expression one of guarded curiosity, while Miss Sylvia Trent kept young Timothy close, her face pale but composed. Hastings quickly recounted the evening's events: the theft of the ivory statuette at 7:50, the discovery of the butler's body at 8 o'clock, and the alibis, or lack thereof, provided by the guests. He mentioned the brass candlestick, its base stained with blood, and the untouched lock on the statuette's case. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted slightly, his eyes never leaving Hastings' face. "Most interesting," Poirot murmured when Hastings finished. "A theft, a murder, and all within the span of 10 minutes. The timing, it is precise, n'est-ce pas? And the candlestick, such a clumsy weapon, yet so conveniently placed. Tell me, Sir Reginald, this statuette, it is of great value, yes?" "Beyond measure," Sir Reginald replied, his voice tight, "not only for its craftsmanship, but for its history. It was said to belong to a Maharaja, though I confess I purchased it through a dealer in London. Its provenance is complex." Poirot's eyes gleamed.
And this butler, Mr. Blake, how long was he in your employ? 15 years, Lady Beatrice interjected, her voice trembling. He was loyal, discreet. I cannot imagine why anyone would harm him. Perhaps, Poirot said softly, he saw something he should not have seen, or knew something he should not have known. He turned to the group, his gaze piercing. I must see the body, and then the scene of the theft. Hastings, you will assist me. The rest of you remain here. No one leaves this room until I return. Victor Langston bristled. See here, Poirot. I'm not accustomed to being ordered about like a schoolboy. Poirot's smile was polite but firm. Monsieur Langston, a man is dead and a crime has been committed. If you wish the truth to be found, you will cooperate. The little grey cells, they require order and method. Langston muttered something under his breath but subsided, puffing on his cigar. Poirot, movements precise. He examined the wound at the base of Blake's skull, then studied the candlestick, which lay a few feet away. The blow was swift, he murmured. From behind, I think. The candlestick is heavy, yes, but not so heavy that a woman could not wield it, or a man with little strength. Hastings, observe the blood. It is fresh, but not pooled excessively. The death was recent, just as you said. He rose and moved to the alcove where the statuette's case stood. The glass was unblemished, the lock intact. Poirot ran a gloved finger along the edge, his brow furrowing. No scratches, no signs of force. The thief, he was clever, or had a key. Tell me, Hastings, who had access to this case? Only Sir Reginald, as far as I know, Hastings replied. He mentioned the key was kept in his study. Bon, we shall examine this study later. Poirot's eyes darted to the floor, where a single white petal lay, half crushed. He picked it up, twirling it between his fingers. A chrysanthemum, perhaps? From the gardens, or perhaps a corsage? Curious. He slipped the petal into his pocket and turned back to the body. This Mr. Blake, he was trusted, yes? But trust, it can hide many secrets. Returning to the dining room, Poirot addressed the guests with calm authority. Mesdames et messieurs, I have seen the scene. And already the little grey cells, they begin to work. But I must know more. Each of you will speak with me one by one in the library. We shall begin with you, Sir Reginald. The host nodded, though his expression was strained. As the others waited, Poirot led Sir Reginald to the library, a cozy room lined with leather-bound books and lit by a single lamp. Hastings followed, notebook in hand. Now, Sir Reginald, Poirot began, settling into a chair. Tell me of this statuette. Why was it so precious to you? And who knew of its value? Sir Reginald sighed, running a hand through his beard. It was a gift to myself, Monsieur Poirot, a symbol of my success. I made my fortune in trade, you see, spices, silks, and curios from the East. The statuette was purchased from a dealer in Mayfair, a man named Hargrove. He claimed it was cursed, but I don't believe in such nonsense. As for who knew its value, I spoke of it freely. All my guests were aware. And Mr. Blake, Poirot pressed, did he know more than he should? Sir Reginald hesitated. Gordon was discreet. But he handled my correspondence with Hargrove. He may have overheard things. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And your guests? Are there tensions, rivalries, secrets among them? Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. Every family has surface. The statuette. It is the key, or perhaps the bait. And this murder, it is no accident. Someone in this house is playing a dangerous game, and Hercule Poirot will uncover their moves. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The little Belgian's arrival had set the stage, and the mystery of Ivory House
was only beginning to unfold. Chapter 4. The Interrogations. The library of Ivory House, with its dark oak shelves and the soft glow of a single lamp, provided a fitting stage for Hercule Poirot's methodical inquiry. The air was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax, and the distant howl of the October wind added a somber note to the proceedings. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the fireplace, his notebook open, ready to record every word as Poirot began his interviews with the guests. The little Belgian detective sat in a high-backed chair, his posture impeccable, his green eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. The murder of Mr. Gordon Blake and the theft of the ivory statuette had set a complex puzzle before him, and he was determined to unravel it with his cherished little grey cells. Poirot had requested that the guests remain in the dining room under the watchful eye of Peters, the assistant butler, while he spoke to each in turn. The process, he explained to Hastings, was not merely to gather facts, but to observe. The twitch of a lip, the flicker of an eye, the hesitation in a voice. "The truth, mon ami," he had said, "hides in the smallest details." First to enter was Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, her silk gown rustling as she settled into the chair opposite Poirot. Her delicate features were pale, her hands twisting the lace handkerchief until it threatened to tear. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice trembling, "this is a dreadful business. Gordon was like family. I cannot fathom who would do such a thing." Poirot's smile was gentle but probing. "Madame, I am most sorry for your distress. Tell me, where were you between 7:50, when the statuette was discovered missing, and 8 o'clock, when the scream was heard?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. I stepped out to the kitchen to speak with the cook. The dessert was to be served, and I wanted to ensure everything was in order. I was gone only a moment. "And did you see Mr. Blake during this time?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "No," she said quickly. "I mean, I may have passed him in the hall, but I didn't notice. My mind was on the dinner." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "And the statuette, did you ever handle it, or the key to its case?" "Never," Lady Beatrice replied, her voice firm. "That was Reginald's domain. He was so proud of it." Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. "May I go now?"
We shall verify it. Next came Eleanor Ashburn, her dark curls slightly dishevelled, her expression a mix of defiance and fear. She sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on Poirot. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the powder room when the scream came. I didn't see anything." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mademoiselle, the powder room is near the staircase, is it not? Did you hear anything unusual before the scream? A footstep, a voice?" Eleanor's lips parted, then closed. I thought I heard someone moving in the hall, but it was faint. I didn't think much of it until we found Gordon." "And your father's statuette?" Poirot continued. "Did it interest you?" She shrugged, a touch too casually. "It was pretty, I suppose. Father was obsessed with it. I didn't care for all the talk of curses." Poirot leaned forward. "Curses, mademoiselle? Did someone speak of this curse in your presence?" Eleanor flushed. "Just gossip. Mrs. Whitmore mentioned it at dinner. She's always spinning stories." As Eleanor left, Poirot murmured, "She hides something, Hastings. A small thing, perhaps, but it is there." One by one, the guests entered. Juliet, the guests. Julian Carver, the barrister, was composed, his answers precise. He had remained at the table discussing legal matters with Dr. Grayson. "I saw nothing, Monsieur Poirot," he said, though his eyes lingered on the door as if expecting interruption. Victor Langston, gruff and impatient, admitted to fetching his cigar case from the drawing room, but insisted he was alone and saw no one. "I don't care for your insinuations, Poirot," he growled. But Poirot merely smiled. Mrs. Clara Whitmore was next, her novelist's curiosity undimmed by the tragedy. "I was writing," she said, tapping her notebook. "I noted the time, 7:52, when Sir Reginald announced the theft. I stayed at the table observing. It's what I do." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And what did you observe, madame?" She hesitated, then leaned forward. Tension. Lady Beatrice was fidgety all evening. Langston kept staring at the statuette, and Eleanor seemed distracted. As for Blake, he was unusually quiet, even for a butler. "Most interesting," Poirot said. "You see much, madame." "Perhaps too much." Dr. Lionel Grayson followed, his hearty demeanor subdued. "I was at the table," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I'm a doctor, not a detective, but I'd say Blake was struck with force. The candlestick fits the wound perfectly." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And you, doctor, have you any interest in curios like the statuette?" Grayson chuckled, though it sounded sad. He was upset about the statuette. He thought it was bad luck. I stayed to comfort him. "And you saw nothing else?" Poirot asked, his gaze softening as he looked at the boy. Timothy's eyes met Poirot's, wide and solemn. "I saw Mr. Blake earlier," he whispered. "He was talking to someone in the hall before dinner." He sounded scared. Poirot leaned forward. "And who was this person, mon petit?" Timothy glanced at Miss Trent, then shook his head. "I didn't see." It was dark as they left. Poirot sat back, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. "Hastings, the picture begins to form. The alibis, they are too neat, too convenient. And this boy, he sees more than he says. We must watch him." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. "What next, Poirot?" "We return to the scene," Poirot said, rising. "The candlestick, the petal, the locked case, these are the threads. And somewhere, mon ami, they will lead us to the truth." As they stepped into the hall, the clock struck 9, its chimes echoing through Ivory House like a warning. The questions had begun. But the answers, Poirot knew, would require patience and precision. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The grand hall of Ivory House was silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards and the distant wail of the wind outside. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the polished oak, paced slowly before the empty glass case that had once held the ivory statuette. Captain Arthur Hastings stood nearby, his notebook clutched tightly, watching his friend's meticulous movements. The murder of Mr. Gordon Blake and the theft of the priceless crane statuette had cast a web of suspicion over the household, and Poirot's little gray cells were now in full motion, sifting through the tangle of alibis and half-truths. The local police had arrived shortly after Poirot's interviews, led by Inspector Caldwell, a stout man with a bristling mustache and a no-nonsense demeanor. Caldwell had declared the case straightforward. Victor Langston, the brusque businessman, was the obvious suspect. "He's got motive," Caldwell insisted, addressing Sir Reginald and the assembled guests in the dining room. "Langston's business dealings are shaky. Word is he's in debt up to his ears. That statuette could fetch a fortune on the black market, and he admits he was alone in the drawing room when the scream was heard." Langston's face reddened, his cigar trembling in his hand. "This is preposterous," he bellowed. "I'm no thief, and I'm certainly no murderer." "I was fetching my cigar case, as I said. You've no proof." Inspector Caldwell crossed his arms. "We found your cigar case near the staircase, Langston. Awfully close to where Blake was killed. And that candlestick, your fingerprints are all over it." A murmur rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice gasped, and Eleanor Ashbourne's eyes frowned, his legal mind clearly weighing the accusation. Mrs. Clara Whitmore scribbled furiously, her novelist's instincts alive with the drama. while Dr. Lionel Grayson adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable. Miss Sylvia Trent tightened her grip on young Timothy, who stared at Langston with an unsettling intensity. Poirot, standing quietly to one side, raised a hand. "Pardon, Inspector, but may Hercule Poirot make an observation? The fingerprints, they are interesting, oui, but not conclusive. Monsieur Langston, he smokes his cigars often, n'est-ce pas? The candlestick, it is a common object in this house. Others may have touched it." Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "You're saying it's a coincidence?" "I say nothing of coincidence," Poirot replied, his voice smooth. "I say only that the truth, it is not so simple. The candlestick, it is too obvious, too convenient. And the statuette, where is it now? A thief who kills does not leave his weapon behind for all to see." Hastings, catching Poirot's drift, felt a stir of excitement. The inspector was chasing what Poirot often called a red herring, a clue designed to mislead. But who had placed it there? And why? Caldwell grunted, unconvinced. "We'll search Langston's room first. If that statuette's there, this case is closed." As the inspector and his constable moved to escort Langston upstairs, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, while the good inspector follows his herring, we shall pursue a different path. Come, let us examine the study of Sir Reginald. The key to the statuette's case, it is there, I believe." The study was a small, orderly room at the back of the house, its walls lined with maps and ledgers from Sir Reginald's trading ventures. A heavy oak desk dominated the space, its surface cluttered with papers and a silver inkstand. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, pausing on a small brass key hanging on a hook behind the desk. "Voilà," he murmured, lifting it carefully. "The key to the case. But was it used?" Hastings frowned. If the lock wasn't forced, someone must have taken it. But Sir Reginald said only he had access. "Précisément," Poirot said, his moustache twitching. And yet the theft was silent, unnoticed. This suggests familiarity with the house and its routines. He opened the desk drawer, revealing a leather-bound ledger. Flipping through it, he paused at a page marked with hurried scrawls. "Mon ami, look here. Payments to a Mr. Hargrove, the dealer who sold the statuette. Large sums, paid in installments." Most curious, before Hastings could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Miss Sylvia Trent stood in the door. Voice, low and urgent. "It's about Timothy," she said. "He saw something before dinner, something he's afraid to tell. He says Mr. Blake was arguing with someone in the garden, not just talking, but angry. I think it was about the statuette. And who was this person?" Poirot's voice was calm, but insistent. "He won't say," Miss Trent replied. "He's frightened, Monsieur Poirot. He thinks someone might hurt him." Poirot's tone softened. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have done well to tell me. Protect the boy and say nothing of this to the others." As Miss Trent left, Poirot emerged, his expression thoughtful. "The boy, Hastings, he is the key to something. His silence, it is not cowardice, but caution. We must speak with him, but gently." They returned to the dining room, where Inspector Caldwell was announcing the results of the search. "Nothing in Langston's room," he admitted grudgingly, "but I'm not done with him yet." Langston smirked, though his eyes remained wary. Poirot, however, was already moving on, his gaze settling on young Timothy, who sat clutching Miss Trent's hand. "Monsieur Timothy," Poirot said, crouching to the boy's level. "You are a brave young man, oui? Will you walk with me in the hall?
I wish only to ask you about the flowers in the garden." Timothy hesitated, then nodded, his small hand slipping into Poirot's. As they stepped into the hall, Poirot pointed to the chrysanthemum petal he had found earlier, now carefully preserved in a handkerchief. "You know the gardens, do you not? Is this petal from there?" Timothy's eyes widened. It's from the bed near the terrace. I saw Mr. Blake there before dinner. He was with someone, and they were shouting." "And this person," Poirot said softly, "did you see their face?" Timothy shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "It was too dark. But they were wearing a coat, a long one, like Mr. Langston's." Poirot's smile was kind but sharp. "Merci, mon petit. You have helped more than you know." As they returned to the dining room, Hastings saw the glint in Poirot's eye. The inspector's focus on Langston was a distraction, but the petal, the ledger, and Timothy's words were threads in a larger tapestry. The red herrings were multiplying, but Poirot was already cutting through them, his mind fixed on the truth hidden in the shadows of Ivory House. The atmosphere in Ivory House had grown taut, like a violin string stretched to its limit. The October wind rattled the windows, and the flickering candlelight cast near the empty statuette case. To Poirot, such a trifle was no mere accident. It was a thread in the intricate tapestry of the crime. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low as he stood beside the glass case. "The petal, it is not merely a flower. It is a signpost. It tells us where to look and when." He held the delicate white petal between his gloved fingers, its edges slightly curled from being trodden upon. "This came from the garden, yes, but it was found indoors near the scene of the crime. How did it travel here, and why?" Hastings frowned, his notebook open. "Perhaps someone brushed against the flowers and carried it inside on their shoe?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Possible, Hastings, but too vague. The petal was not crushed, as it would be underfoot. It was dropped, deliberately or by accident, by someone who had been in the garden. And young Timothy tells us Mr. Blake was there, arguing, before dinner. This is no coincidence." They moved to the French windows leading to the terrace, where the chrysanthemum beds lay just beyond. The night was dark, the moon obscured by clouds, but Poirot's pocket torch cast a steady beam over the neatly tended flowers. He knelt, examining the soil. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint scuff mark near the edge of the bed. "A shoe, perhaps, or the hem of a coat. Someone stood here, and recently." Hastings peered over his shoulder. Could it be Blake's footprint, or the person he was arguing with? "Précisément," Poirot replied. "We must compare this mark to the shoes of our guests. But first, let us consider the timeline. Timothy saw Blake in the garden before dinner, which began at 7. The theft was discovered at 7:50, and the murder at 8. The petal, it links these moments." Returning to the hall, Poirot's gaze fell on the brass candlestick, still lying where it had been found, its base stained with blood. He crouched beside it, his eyes narrowing. "This candlestick, Hastings, it is not only a weapon, but a clue. Observe its position. It lies parallel to the staircase, as if placed, not dropped. A murderer in a hurry does not arrange his weapon so neatly." Hastings blinked. "You think it was staged?" "I think," Poirot said, rising, "that someone wishes us to believe the candlestick is the whole story. But the little gray cells, they are not so easily deceived." He paused, his head tilting. "And there is something else. The candlestick, it is one of a pair, oui?
Where is its mate? Hastings glanced around, realizing Poirot was right. The staircase was flanked by 2 alcoves, each meant to hold a candlestick. But only one. Langston, and your cigar case was found near the body. Care to explain that? Langston's face was flushed with anger. I told you. I dropped it earlier. Someone must have moved it. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the tension. Pardon, Inspector, but may I ask a question of the household? The candlestick by the staircase. It has a twin, does it not? Where is it now? Sir Reginald frowned, glancing at his wife. There are 2, yes. The other should be in the opposite alcove. Lady Beatrice nodded, her hands twisting her handkerchief. I hadn't noticed it was missing. Perhaps the servants moved it for polishing. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps, but I think not. He turned to the group. Mesdames et messieurs, I ask you to consider your movements this evening. Did any of you touch the candlesticks, or see them moved? A chorus of denials followed, though Hastings noted Eleanor Ashburn's quick glance at Julian Carver and Mrs. Clara Whitmore's pen pausing mid-stroke. Dr. Lionel Grayson cleared his throat. I passed through the hall before dinner, he said. I believe both candlesticks were in place then. And you, Mademoiselle Trent? Poirot asked, his gaze softening as he looked at the governess. Miss Trent hesitated, her arm around Timothy. I don't recall. Timothy and I were in the drawing room before dinner, but I didn't notice the candlesticks. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci. And now, a small request. I would like each of you to permit an inspection of your shoes. A detail, perhaps, but one that may illuminate. Inspector Caldwell scoffed. Shoes? What's this nonsense, Poirot? A precaution, Inspector, Poirot replied smoothly. The garden, it leaves its mark. Reluctantly, the guests complied, lifting their feet for inspection. Poirot moved methodically, his torch sweeping over each shoe. Most were clean, but when he reached Victor Langston, he paused. A faint smear of soil clung to the edge of Langston's left boot. Monsieur, you have been in the garden, perhaps? Langston's scowl deepened. I stepped out for a smoke before dinner, so what? Poirot said nothing, but his eyes flicked to Lady Beatrice, whose face had paled. And you, madame? Your shoes, they are most elegant, but do they carry the garden's trace? Lady Beatrice lifted her skirt slightly, revealing pristine silk slippers. I told you I was in the kitchen, she said, her voice sharp. Poirot smiled faintly. Of course. Merci à tous. As the guests dispersed, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. The soil on Langston's boot, it matches the garden, but it is not enough. The candlestick, the petal, the
obvious suspect, but you don't seem convinced. Because, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low, the obvious is rarely the truth. The candlestick is a lie. The petal is a truth, and the statuette? It is the heart of this mystery. We must find the second candlestick, and then perhaps we shall see the shape of the crime. As the clock struck 10, Poirot's words hung in the air, a promise of revelations yet to come. The shadows of Ivory House seemed to deepen, concealing secrets that only Poirot's relentless logic could uncover. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The air in Ivory House grew heavier as the night deepened, the October wind howling with renewed vigor against the ancient walls. The grand dining room, once a stage for polite conversation and clinking glasses, now felt like a pressure cooker, the guests' nerves fraying under the weight of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his eyes sharp as ever, sat quietly at the head of the table, his fingers steepled,
observing the assembled company with the precision of a watchmaker. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt the tension in the room like a physical force, each guest's glance and gesture revealing more than their words. Inspector Caldwell had retreated to the hall to confer with his constable, leaving Poirot to continue his subtle probing. The discovery of soil on Victor Langston's boot and the missing second candlestick had stirred the pot, but Poirot was not content to rest on these clues. "The truth," he had murmured to Hastings earlier, "it hides behind the masks of respectability. We must peel them away, one by one." Poirot's gaze settled on Mrs. Clara Whitmore, whose notebook lay open before her, filled with hurried scrawls. "Madame Whitmore," he began, his voice smooth, "you are a writer of mysteries, oui? You observe the human heart with a keen eye. Tell me, what secrets have you seen in this house tonight?" Mrs. Whitmore's lips curved in a faint smile, though her eyes were wary. "I see stories, Monsieur Poirot, not secrets. But I'll admit there's tension here. Lady Beatrice has been on edge all evening, and Mr. Langston's temper is a powder keg. As for Eleanor and Mr. Carver," she paused, her pen tapping the page, "they're closer than they let on." Eleanor Ashbourne flushed, her hand slipping from Julian Carver's. "That's absurd," she snapped. "Julian and I are friends, nothing more." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Friends, mademoiselle. Yet your eyes, they seek him often. And you, Monsieur Carver, you are quick to defend her. Is there perhaps a secret you share?" Julian's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "I care for Eleanor as any gentleman would. There's no secret in that." Poirot nodded. "Truly." Lady Beatrice's handkerchief twisted in her hands, the lace fraying. I must have been mistaken. I meant to go to the kitchen, but stopped in the drawing room to collect my thoughts." Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. "Beatrice, what is this? You said nothing of the drawing room." Her face paled, and she looked away. "It was nothing, Reginald. I was upset about the statuette. I needed a moment alone." Poirot's gaze shifted to Victor Langston, whose cigar smoke curled toward the ceiling. "And you, Monsieur Langston, you were in the drawing room, oui? Did you see Madame Ashburn there?" Langston's scowl deepened. "I didn't see anyone. I was fetching my cigar case, as I said. The room was empty." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "Two people in the same room, yet neither sees the other. The drawing room, it seems, is a place of shadows." Hastings scribbled in his notebook, his mind racing. Lady Beatrice's lie about the kitchen was a crack in her polished facade, and Langston's insistence on solitude felt rehearsed. But before Poirot could press further, Miss Sylvia Trent spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Monsieur Poirot, I must tell you something." She glanced at Timothy, who sat beside her, his small hands clenched. Timothy overheard something else before dinner. Not just the argument in the garden, but a conversation in the study. All eyes turned to the boy, who shrank under the scrutiny. Poirot crouched beside him, his tone gentle. "Mon petit, you are very brave to speak. What did you hear?" Timothy's voice was barely audible. It was Mr. Blake. And someone else. They were talking about money. Mr. Blake said, "You can't keep this hidden forever. It's too dangerous." The other person sounded angry, but I couldn't hear who it was. A hush fell over the room. Sir Reginald's face darkened. "Money? What could Gordon have known about money?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, Sir Reginald, it relates to your ledger. The payments to Mr. Hargrove for the statuette. Were there irregularities?" Sir Reginald stiffened. "My finances are my own concern, Poirot. Gordon had no business meddling." "Yet meddle he did," Poirot said softly. "And now he is dead." Dr. Lionel Grayson cleared his throat. breaking the silence. "This is all speculation. Blake was a butler, not a banker. He might have overheard something trivial." Poirot's smile was sharp. "Nothing, Doctor, is trivial in a murder. The statuette, the money, the lies, they are connected. And you, Monsieur Grayson, you have been most quiet. Tell me, did you know Mr. Blake well?" Grayson adjusted his glasses, his ruddy cheeks flushing.
"Might have. The gardens are extensive." Poirot's gaze lingered on the doctor, then moved to the group. "Mesdames et messieurs, the lies, they multiply. The drawing room, the study, the garden. These are the stages of our drama. But the truth, it is close. I ask you to remain here while I confer with my friend Hastings." As the guests murmured among themselves, Poirot led Hastings to the hall. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low, "the cracks, they begin to show. Lady Beatrice lies about her whereabouts. Langston, he is too quick to deny. And the boy's words, they point to a secret tied to money, perhaps blackmail. The statuette, it is not just a prize, but a motive." Hastings nodded, his mind spinning. But who was Blake arguing with? And what about the missing candlestick? "Patience, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes glinting. "The candlestick, it will reveal itself. For now, we must watch and listen. The lies, they are like the chrysanthemum petal. Small, but they lead us to the heart of the crime." As they returned to the dining room, the clock struck 11, its chimes echoing through Ivory House like a summons. The web of deceit was unraveling, and Poirot's relentless logic was drawing ever closer to the truth. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. The oppressive atmosphere in Ivory House had reached a breaking point. The weight of suspicion and half-spoken truths pressing down on the guests like the heavy clouds outside. The dining room, once a haven of elegance, now felt like a courtroom, with Hercule Poirot as both judge and inquisitor. The flickering candles cast long shadows, mirroring the doubts that danced in every mind. Captain Arthur Hastings, stationed near the door, watched the scene unfold, his notebook filled with fragments of clues and contradictions. Poirot's relentless probing had stirred the pot, and now, it seemed, something was about to boil over. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small frame commanding the room with quiet authority. His green eyes swept over the guests. Sir Reginald's stern frown, Lady Beatrice's trembling hands, Eleanor's defiant glare, Julian Carver's guarded composure, Victor Langston's simmering anger, Mrs. Clara Whitmore's keen observation, Dr. Lionel Grayson's uneasy fidgeting, and Miss Sylvia Trent's protective grip on young Timothy. The boy's wide eyes followed Poirot, as if sensing the Belgian detective was on the verge of uncovering a truth too heavy for the room to bear. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but edged with purpose. "We have heard many stories this evening, some true, some less so. The theft of the statuette, the murder of Mr. Blake, the lies about your whereabouts. These are pieces of a puzzle. But there is the fire." Then, to everyone's surprise, Lady Beatrice rose, her face ashen, her handkerchief crumpled in her fist. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice breaking, I cannot bear it any longer." "I must tell you the truth," Sir Reginald's head snapped toward her. "Beatrice, what are you saying?" She ignored him, her eyes fixed on Poirot. "I wasn't in the drawing room to collect my thoughts. I went to the study. I overheard Gordon, Mr. Blake, speaking with someone. It was about the statuette and money. He was threatening to tell Reginald something that could ruin us." The room erupted in murmurs. Eleanor gasped, clutching Julian's arm, while Langston's cigar dropped to the table, forgotten. Mrs. Whitmore's pen scratched furiously, and Dr. Grayson's glasses slipped down his nose. Timothy shrank closer to Miss Trent, his small frame trembling. Poirot's expression remained serene, though his eyes gleamed. "Madame, this is most illuminating. Who was this person Mr. Blake spoke with?" Lady Beatrice's lips trembled. I couldn't see them clearly. The door was ajar and the hall was dark. But I heard Gordon say, "If you don't pay, I'll go to Sir Reginald." I fled before I could hear more. I was afraid. "Afraid of what, madame?" Poirot pressed, his voice gentle but insistent. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Afraid of what it might mean for our family. The statuette, it's brought nothing but trouble. I begged Reginald not to buy it, but he wouldn't listen. And now Gordon is dead. And I—" Her voice broke into a sob, and she sank back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. Sir Reginald reached for her, his face a mixture of shock and concern. "Beatrice, why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," she whispered. "I didn't want to believe it was true." Poirot's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "Madame, your courage, it is admirable. But you have given us only part of the truth. The statuette, the money, the threat, these are not the whole story. Who else was in the study?" Lady Beatrice shook her head, her sobs muffled. "I don't know. I swear it." Poirot turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. "The time for secrets is over. Mr. Blake was killed because he knew something dangerous, something worth killing for. The statuette, it is the key, but not in the way you think. It is not merely a treasure. It is a sharp and trembling. "Stop it! All of you, stop it! Father, Mother, why are we hiding things? The statuette, it's cursed, isn't it? Everyone who touches it ends up ruined." Julian pulled her back, his voice low. "Eleanor, calm down. This isn't helping." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mademoiselle, you speak of a curse. But curses, they are stories. The truth, it is human. What do you know of this statuette?" Eleanor's defiance faltered, and she looked away. "Nothing, just what Father said. It's valuable, and people want it, that's all." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, then shifted to Timothy, who had been silent through the outburst. "Mon petit," he said softly, "you have heard much tonight. Is there more you wish to say?" Timothy's eyes darted to Miss Trent, then back to Poirot. I saw something else," he whispered. "In the garden, before dinner. Mr. Blake dropped a piece of paper. I picked it up, but I didn't tell anyone. It had numbers on it and a name. Hargrove." A collective gasp filled the room. Sir Reginald's face darkened. "Hargrove? The dealer? What does this mean, Poirot?" "It means," Poirot said, his voice steady, "that Mr. Blake was entangled in something far larger than a simple theft. The paper, Timothy, do you still have it?" Timothy nodded, reaching into his pocket and producing a crumpled scrap. Poirot took it, his eyes scanning the scrawled figures. £5,000, Hargrove, due October. Below it, a single word. Proof. Poirot's mustache twitched. "This, mes amis, is no mere note. It is a motive. Mr. Blake knew something about the statuette's purchase, something worth killing to keep hidden." As Lady Beatrice's sobs echoed and Timothy's revelation hung in the air, Hastings,
felt the room shift. The masks were slipping, and the truth, though still veiled, was closer than ever. Poirot's little grey cells were weaving the threads together, and the heart of the mystery was beginning to beat.
Chapter 9. The Trap. The dining room of Ivory House was a cauldron of tension, the air thick with the weight of revelations and the lingering echo of Lady Beatrice's sobs. The crumpled note from young Timothy's pocket, with its cryptic reference to Hargrove and proof, lay on the table before Hercule Poirot, a small but potent clue in the unfolding drama. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt his pulse quicken. Poirot's methodical approach had peeled back layers of deceit, and now, with the guest's secrets spilling forth, the little Belgian detective was ready to set a trap to catch the guilty. Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. His green eyes glinted in the candlelight, and his voice, though calm, carried a steel edge. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we stand at a crossroads. The theft of the statuette, the murder of Mr. Blake, the lies that have surfaced, these are not separate threads but part of a single tapestry. Tonight, we shall weave it together. I ask you all to join me in the hall where the crime began. There we shall reenact the moments before the scream. Inspector Caldwell, who had returned from conferring with his constable, frowned. Reenact? What's this, Poirot? Some theatrical nonsense? Not nonsense, Inspector, Poirot replied, his moustache twitching. Method. The truth. It hides in the details of time and place. By retracing the steps, we shall see what was hidden. The guests exchanged wary glances but complied, rising from their chairs with a mix of reluctance and curiosity. Sir Reginald led the way, his jaw tight, while Lady Beatrice clung to his arm, her face pale. Eleanor and Julian Carver followed, their hands brushing briefly, a gesture Hastings noted with interest. Victor Langston stomped behind, his cigar extinguished, his scowl deeper than ever. Mrs. Clara Whitmore clutched her notebook, her eyes bright with anticipation, while Dr. Lionel Grayson adjusted his glasses nervously. Miss Sylvia Trent guided Timothy, whose small hand trembled in hers. In the grand hall, the scene was much as it had been at 8 o'clock. The empty glass case in the alcove, the blood-stained candlestick by the staircase, and the faint outline of Mr. Blake's body, now removed by the police. The wind howled outside, rattling the French windows, and the chrysanthemum petal, preserved in Poirot's handkerchief, seemed to pulse with significance. Poirot positioned himself near the staircase, his torch casting a steady beam. "Let us begin," he said. "At 7:50, Sir Reginald announced the theft. Some of you left the dining room. Madame Beatrice, you claim you went to the drawing room. Monsieur Langston, you were there also, fetching your cigar case. Mademoiselle Eleanor, you were in the powder room. The rest remained." Beatrice's eyes darted away, and Langston's fists clenched. Poirot continued. "At 8, the scream was heard. Mr. Blake was found dead, struck by this candlestick. But the timing, it is precise, 10 minutes from theft to murder. Let us see how this was done." He turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madame, please walk to the drawing room, as you did that night. Take the same path, and return when you hear my signal." Lady Beatrice hesitated, then moved down the hall, her silk slippers whispering on the floor. Poirot counted softly. 1 minute, 2 minutes. At his clap, she returned, her face flushed. "Now, Monsieur Langston," Poirot said, "you went to the drawing room for your cigar case. Please show us." Langston grunted, striding to the drawing room with heavy steps. Poirot timed him as well, noting, "Less than a minute." "The drawing room, it is close to the staircase, Finally, Eleanor retraced her path to the powder room, her movements quick but nervous. 1 minute, Poirot murmured. "All of you, you had time to reach the staircase, to strike a blow, to return. But the statuette,
Where is it now? He moved to the glass case, his fingers tracing the lock. The key, it was in the study. Someone took it, opened the case, and removed the statuette without breaking the glass. This requires knowledge of the house, of Sir Reginald's habits. But why kill Mr. Blake? Poirot's gaze settled on Timothy, who shrank under the attention. Mon petit, you heard Mr. Blake speak of money, of proof. You found his note. Did you see him take anything from the study? Timothy's voice was a whisper. I saw him put something in his pocket. A paper, I think, before he went to the garden. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A paper. Perhaps the proof he spoke of. And someone knew he had it. He turned to the group, his voice rising. The trap. It is this. One of you took the statuette, not for its value, but to hide a secret. Mr. Blake discovered this secret, and he paid with his life. The candlestick, it is a lie, a distraction. The real weapon, it is elsewhere, as is the statuette. I ask you now, who will confess? A heavy silence fell. Then, to everyone's shock, Dr. Grayson stepped forward, his ruddy cheeks pale. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice trembling, I must speak. I knew about the statuette's history. Hargrove, the dealer, he told me it was stolen from a private collection in India. I warned Blake not to get involved, but he wouldn't listen. He thought he could use it to extort money. The room erupted. Sir Reginald are linked by more than greed. The trap is set, and the guilty, they will not escape. As the guests stared, stunned by Grayson's revelation, Hastings felt the room shift. Poirot had baited the hook, and the killer, he was certain, was feeling the pressure. The chrysanthemum petal, the missing candlestick, the note, all were converging, and the truth was within reach. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The grand hall of Ivory House was a stage set for revelation, its high ceilings and shadowed corners amplifying the tension that gripped the assembled guests. The flickering light of the chandeliers danced across the empty glass case, the blood-stained candlestick, and the faces of those gathered, each marked by fear, guilt, or defiance. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small frame radiating authority, his green eyes piercing through the fog of lies that had clouded the investigation. Captain Arthur Hastings, clutching his notebook, felt his heart pound. This was the moment Poirot's little gray cells would lay bare the truth behind the theft of the ivory statuette and the murder of Mr. Gordon Blake. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, we have played a game of shadows, but now the light of truth must shine. The theft of the statuette, the death of Mr. Blake, these are not separate crimes, but one intricate puzzle. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will reveal the solution. Inspector Caldwell, standing near the staircase, crossed his arms, his skepticism evident. Get on with it, Poirot. We've chased your clues long enough. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. Patience, Inspector. The truth, it requires precision. Let us begin with the facts. He gestured to the glass case. The statuette was taken at 7:50. Its case unlocked without force. The key, it was in Sir Reginald's study, accessible to those who knew the house. 10 minutes later, Mr. Blake was found dead, struck by a candlestick, or so it seems. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. The candlestick, it is a red herring, oui? Its twin is missing, and the blood on this one, it is too convenient. The real weapon I propose was the second candlestick, hidden to mislead us. But let us consider the motive. Why steal the statuette? Why kill the butler? Poirot's gaze swept over the guests, Sir Reginald's stern frown, Lady Beatrice's trembling hands, Eleanor's wide-eyed tension, Julian Carver's guarded composure, Victor Langston's scowl, Mrs. Clara Whit—
Profit from this knowledge. But who did he threaten?
Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice, whose face was ashen.
Madame, you overheard Blake in the study, speaking of money and secrets. You lied about the kitchen, claiming instead the drawing room. Why? Lady Beatrice's voice was barely audible. I was afraid. Afraid for Reginald. I thought Blake was plotting something. No, Poirot said sharply. You were afraid for yourself. The statuette's purchase, it was not as innocent as Sir Reginald believed. You, madame, knew its true origins. You corresponded with Hargrove, did you not, to conceal the truth from your husband? Sir Reginald's eyes widened. Beatrice, is this true? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I arranged the purchase through Hargrove. He said it was legitimate, but later I learned it was stolen. I couldn't tell you, Reginald. It would ruin us. Poirot raised a hand. But Blake discovered this. He saw your letters, madame, and he sought to blackmail you. You were in the study when he argued with someone. Perhaps you were that someone. No, Lady Beatrice cried. I didn't kill him. I believe you, Poirot said, his tone softening. But you know who did. His gaze shifted to Victor Langston. Monsieur Langston, your boot bore the soil of the chrysanthemum bed where Blake argued before dinner. You were there, oui? And your cigar case, found near the body, it was not dropped by accident. Langston's face reddened. I told you, I was smoking. I didn't touch Blake. But you touched the statuette, Poirot said, his voice like a blade. You knew its value, and you knew Blake's threat. You are in debt, monsieur, and the statuette was your salvation, but Blake, he stood in your way. Langston leapt to his feet. This is outrageous. You've no proof. Poirot's smile was cold. The proof? It is in the details. The chrysanthemum petal dropped by you in the hall as you carried the statuette from the case. The second candlestick, hidden in your room. I suspect the police will find it there. And the note in Blake's pocket, it named Hargrove, but it was meant for you. Inspector Caldwell, startled, signalled his constable. Search Langston's room again, now. As the constable hurried upstairs, Poirot continued, his voice relentless. You argued with Blake in the garden, monsieur. He demanded payment to keep silent about the statuette's origins. When he persisted, you followed him to the hall, took the second candlestick, and struck him. Then you placed the first candlestick to mislead us and hid the statuette, intending to retrieve it later. The constable returned, holding a heavy brass candlestick, its base smeared with dried blood. Statuette. It is still in this house, hidden by Monsieur Langston. But the crime, it is not his alone. Madame Beatrice, your silence enabled this tragedy. The truth, it has been found. But at a cost, Eleanor sobbed, clinging to Julian, while Sir Reginald stared at his wife, his expression a mix of betrayal and sorrow. Mrs. Whitmore's pen stilled, her story complete. Dr. Grayson exhaled, and Miss Trent pulled Timothy close, shielding him from the grim revelation. Poirot's voice softened. The little gray cells, they see what the heart conceals. The statuette was the spark, but greed and fear, they were the flame. As Inspector Caldwell handcuffed Langston, Hastings marveled at Poirot's precision. The trap had sprung, the truth laid bare, and Ivory House, though scarred, could begin to heal.
Chapter 11. The Reflection. The Grand Hall of Ivory House, so recently a stage for accusation and revelation, now lay quiet, the weight of truth settling like dust after a storm. The chandeliers cast a soft glow over the polished oak floor, where the bloodstain from Mr. Gordon Blake's murder had been scrubbed away, though its memory lingered. Hercule Poirot stood near the empty glass case, his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes thoughtful. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated on a nearby bench, closed his notebook with a sigh, the events of the evening still swirling in his mind. Victor Langston had been taken away by Inspector Caldwell. The second candlestick and the recovered ivory statuette, found hidden in a false panel in Langston's suitcase, sealing his guilt. Yet the air in Ivory House remained heavy, as if the truth had not fully cleansed the wounds it exposed. The guests had dispersed, some to their rooms, others to the drawing room to recover from the shock. Sir Reginald stood alone by the staircase, his face etched with betrayal, while Lady Beatrice had retired, her confession of concealing the statuette's origins, leaving her fragile. Eleanor and Julian Carver sat together in a corner, their hands entwined, their future uncertain, but hopeful. Mrs. Clara Whitmore had retreated to her notebook, no doubt crafting the night's drama into her next novel. Dr. Lionel Grayson lingered near the fire, his ruddy cheeks pale, and Miss Sylvia Trent had taken young Timothy to bed, shielding him from further distress. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft but resonant. "Mon ami, the case, it is closed. Yet the heart, it is not so easily satisfied. The truth, it is a bitter medicine, is it not?" Hastings nodded, his thoughts on Lady Beatrice's tears and Sir Reginald's silence. "You were brilliant, Poirot, as always, but I can't help feeling sorry for them all. Langston's greed led to murder, but the Ashbourne remain. As for Monsieur Langston, his crime was not only greed but fear. Fear of ruin. Fear of exposure. He killed to protect his secrets. But secrets, they cannot be buried forever." Hastings leaned forward, curious. "That chrysanthemum petal, Poirot, it was the key, wasn't it? Such a small thing, yet it pointed straight to Langston." "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes glinting. "The petal, it was a whisper from the truth. It told us someone had been in the garden, where Blake argued. Langston's boot, the soil, the cigar case, these were the threads. But the petal, it tied them to the moment of the crime. The little gray cells, they see what others overlook." "And the candlestick?" Hastings asked. "You knew the second one was the real weapon all along." Poirot inclined his head. "The first candlestick, it was a lie, a clumsy attempt to mislead. The second, hidden by Langston, bore the true marks of the crime. But it was the statuette, Hastings, that was the heart of this tragedy. Its stolen origins, its value, its secrets, they drove Blake to blackmail and Langston to murder." Hastings shook his head, marveling. "You saw it all, Poirot. The way you set that trap, getting Grayson to reveal Blake's extortion, pushing Langston to crack, it was masterful." Poirot's smile faded, his expression turning solemn. "Masterful, perhaps, but not without cost. The truth, it brings justice, but it also brings pain. Lady Beatrice, she hid the statuette's past to protect her family, yet her silence enabled Langston's crime. Timothy, so young, saw too much for his years, and Blake, his greed cost him his life. The human condition, Hastings, it is a puzzle even Hercule Poirot cannot fully solve." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind outside softening to a low moan. Poirot adjusted his coat, his movements precise as ever. "Come, mon ami," he said at last. "The train to London awaits, and Ivory House, it must find its peace without us." As they stepped into the chilly night,
Hastings glanced back at the manor, its windows glowing faintly against the darkness. "Do you think they'll recover, Poirot? The Ashbournes, I mean." Poirot paused, his eyes distant. "The heart, it mends, Hastings, but it never forgets. They will go on, as we all must, carrying their truths and their regrets. For Hercule Poirot, it is enough to bring order to the chaos, to shine light where there is shadow." With that, he turned and walked toward the waiting car, his small figure resolute against the vast night. Hastings followed, his mind filled with the echoes of the case, the petal, the candlestick, the note, and the secrets that had unraveled in Ivory House.
Clouds that had lingered through the night. The manor, so recently a stage for murder and deceit, stood quiet, its ivy-clad walls bearing silent witness to the storm that had passed. The guests, shaken by Hercule Poirot's dramatic revelation of Victor Langston's guilt, had retired to their rooms, leaving the grand hall empty, save for the faint echoes of the previous evening's chaos. Captain Arthur Hastings sat in the drawing room, sipping a cup of tea brought by the nervous assistant butler, Peters. His notebook lay closed on the table, its pages filled with the details of the case that had unraveled so swiftly under Poirot's relentless logic. Poirot himself stood by the French windows, gazing out at the chrysanthemum beds where the critical petal had been traced. His patent leather shoes gleamed. His mustache was impeccably waxed. Yet there was a weariness in his posture, a subtle sign that even the great detective felt the weight of the tragedy. "Mon ami," he said, turning to Hastings, "the case is closed. The guilty is in chains. Yet Ivory House, it does not rejoice. The truth, it is a heavy burden." Hastings set down his cup, his brow furrowed. "You're right, Poirot. Langston's arrest has brought justice, but the Ashbournes, they're shattered. Lady Beatrice's confession, Sir Reginald's anger, it's torn them apart." Poirot nodded, his green eyes thoughtful. The statuette, it was more than a stolen treasure. It was a mirror, reflecting the secrets of those who coveted it. Lady Beatrice hid its origins to protect her family's honor. Blake sought to exploit it for his own gain. Langston killed to preserve his crumbling empire. And yet, each believed they acted for necessity. Hastings leaned forward. "What about Eleanor and Julian? They seemed so close during the ordeal. Do you think they'll weather this?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "The young, they are resilient. Mademoiselle Eleanor and Monsieur Carver. They share a bond forged in crisis. It may yet grow stronger, though the shadow of this night will linger." He paused, his gaze returning to the garden. And young Timothy, so observant, so silent, he saw more than most. His courage, it was a light in the darkness. The drawing-room door opened, and Sir Reginald entered, his face haggard but composed. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice low, "I owe you my thanks. You've brought clarity to this nightmare, though it comes at a cost." Poirot inclined his head. "Sir Reginald, the truth, it is never without pain. Your wife, she acted to protect you, but her silence enabled a greater crime. You must find a way to forgive, or the wounds will brought only discord. Let it be a lesson in the dangers of secrets." As Sir Reginald left, Mrs. Clara Whitmore appeared, her notebook tucked under her arm. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her eyes bright with a writer's curiosity. "You've given me the story of a lifetime. I'll be discreet, of course, but this tale, it begs to be told." Poirot's smile was wry. "Madame, you may write your story, but remember, the truth. It is not for sensationalism. It is for understanding the human heart. She nodded, a touch chastened, and departed. Hastings watched her go, then turned to Poirot. "You think she'll turn this into a novel, don't you?" "Sans doute," Poirot replied. "But she will see only the drama, not the pain. That is the way of the storyteller." The sound of footsteps announced Miss Sylvia Trent, who entered with Timothy at her side. The boy's eyes were red-rimmed, but he stood tall. "Monsieur Poirot," Miss Trent said softly, "Timothy wanted to thank you. He's been so brave, but he's still shaken." Poirot crouched to Timothy's level, his voice gentle. "Mon petit, you have the heart of a lion. You saw what others missed, and your truth helped us find the guilty. Be proud, but rest now. The shadows, they are gone." Timothy managed a small smile. "Thank you, sir. I just wanted Mr. Blake to be all right." Poirot placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You honored him with your courage. Go now, with Mademoiselle Trent, and dream of brighter days." As they left, Hastings felt a pang of admiration for Poirot's ability to comfort, even as he unraveled mysteries. "You're remarkable, Poirot," he said. "You see the crime, but you never lose sight of the people." Poirot rose, adjusting his coat. "The crime, Hastings, it is but a reflection of the people. To solve one, you must understand the other. Now come, the car awaits, and London calls. Ivory House must find its own path forward." They stepped into the crisp morning air, the manor looming behind them like a silent sentinel. As the car rolled down the gravel drive, Hastings glanced back, wondering how the Ashbournes would rebuild. Poirot beside him was silent, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, the next truth, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 13. The Lingering Questions. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting long fingers of light through the tall windows of Ivory House. Yet the warmth did little to dispel the chill that lingered in the hearts of its inhabitants. The arrest of Victor Langston for the murder of Mr. Gordon Blake. A velvet-upholstered chair, sipped a second cup of tea, his mind troubled by the loose ends that seemed to dangle just beyond Poirot's grasp. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, setting his cup down. "You've solved the case, and Langston's in custody. The statuette's been found, and the truth about its stolen origins is out. Yet I can't shake the feeling that something's missing. Why do I feel there's more to this?" Poirot turned, his moustache twitching with a faint smile. "Mon ami, your instincts, they are improving. The case, it is closed, oui. But the heart of Ivory House still beats with secrets. The little grey cells, they sense the ripples beneath the surface. Let us reflect. What questions remain?" Hastings opened his notebook, flipping through pages filled with scribbled clues and timelines. "Well, there's Lady Beatrice's role. She admitted to hiding the statuette's origins. But was she truly just protecting her family? And Timothy's note. Proof. What exactly was Blake planning to reveal? And Dr. Grayson. He seemed awfully quick to point to Blake's gambling debts. Could he know more than he let on? Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Précisément, Hastings. The truth, it is like a diamond, clear, but with many facets. Lady Beatrice, her confession was heartfelt, but incomplete. The note, it hints at a larger scheme. And Monsieur Grayson, his knowledge of the statuette's history, it raises questions. Let us speak with him once more." They found Dr. Lionel Grayson in the library, surrounded by leather-bound volumes, his ruddy cheeks flushed as he sipped a glass of brandy. He looked up, startled, as Poirot and Hastings entered. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, setting the glass down. "I thought your work here was done." "Not quite, Doctor,"
Poirot said, settling into a chair with his usual precision. The crime, it is solved. But the motives, they are not fully clear. You spoke of Mr. Blake's gambling debts and his knowledge of the statuette's stolen origins. How did you come to know this? Grayson shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his glasses. I overheard Blake speaking with someone in the village a few weeks ago. He mentioned Hargrove and the statuette, said it was his ticket out. I warned him to stay clear of trouble, but he was desperate. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this someone, did you see them? Grayson hesitated, his fingers tightening around the glass. No, it was dark, in an alley near the pub. I didn't linger, Hastings scribbled in his notebook, sensing Poirot's skepticism. Doctor, Poirot continued, you are a man of observation, a physician, yet you claim not to know who Blake spoke with. Was it perhaps someone in this house?
You know more, Doctor, but you fear to speak. Let me propose a theory. You knew of Blake's plan to blackmail, and you feared he would implicate others, perhaps even yourself. Grayson's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. That's absurd, he stammered. I had nothing to do with his schemes. Perhaps not, Poirot said calmly. But you knew of them, and you kept silent. Why? Before Grayson could respond, the door opened, and Eleanor Ashbourne entered, her dark curls framing a face taut with emotion. Monsieur Poirot, I heard you were questioning again. I need to tell you something. It's about... Julian Poirot's gaze softened. Mademoiselle, speak freely. What of Monsieur Carver? Eleanor took a deep breath. He knew about the statuette, too. Not just its value, but its history. He's been researching Hargrove's dealings for a case in London. He told me Blake approached him before dinner, hinting at a deal to share what he knew. Julian refused, but he didn't tell you because he was protecting me. Hastings' pen paused, his eyes wide. Protecting you? From what? Eleanor's voice trembled. From father. If Julian exposed the statuette's origins, it would ruin our family's reputation. He thought he could handle Blake quietly. Poirot's fingers steepled. Most interesting. Monsieur Carver. He is a man of principle, yet he too kept a secret. The web, it grows more tangled. Grayson, still shaken, rose. I've told you all I know, Poirot. May I go? For now, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. But the truth, Doctor, it will not stay hidden. As Grayson left, Eleanor lingered, her eyes pleading. Please, Monsieur Poirot, don't judge Julian too harshly. He only wanted to protect me. Poirot nodded. The heart, mademoiselle. It often clouds the judgment. Merci for your candor. As Eleanor departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. This changes things, doesn't it? Julian's involvement, Grayson's silence. There's more to this than Langston's crime. Oui, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low. Langston killed Blake, but the statuette's shadow touches many. The questions, they linger. What else did Blake know? And who else feared his revelations? We must watch, Hastings, for the truth is not yet fully ours. The clock in the library chimed noon, its notes a reminder that time, like Poirot's relentless logic, would uncover the final secrets of Ivory House. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of Ivory House, casting a muted glow over the drawing. Hastings well knew was not content to let the case rest. The lingering questions, Eleanor's confession about Julian Carver's knowledge, Dr. Grayson's evasions, and the cryptic note naming Hargrove demanded answers. The little gray cells, Poirot had said, were still at work, weaving the final threads of the mystery. Poirot stood,
his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on a portrait of a stern-faced Ashbourne ancestor above the fireplace. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "the puzzle, it is nearly complete. But there are threads that dangle. The statuette's shadow. It touches more than Langston's greed. We must seek the truth behind Mr. Blake's proof and Monsieur Carver's silence." Hastings, his notebook open, nodded. "Eleanor said Julian knew about Hargrove's dealings. Could he have been involved with Blake's blackmail scheme?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Not involved, Hastings, but aware. Monsieur Carver, he is a barrister, a man of law. He sought to protect Mademoiselle Eleanor, but in doing so, he concealed a truth. Let us speak with him." They found Julian Carver in the library, poring over a legal journal, his face drawn with fatigue. He looked up as Poirot and Hastings entered, his expression wary. "Monsieur Poirot, I assume you're here about what Eleanor told you." "I meant no harm by keeping silent." Poirot settled into a chair, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Carver, the truth, it is not a matter of intent but of consequence. You knew Mr. Blake approached you with a deal regarding the statuette. What did he tell you?" Julian sighed, rubbing his temples. "Before dinner, Blake pulled me aside in the hall. He said he had evidence that the statuette was stolen, not just from an Indian collection, but part of a larger smuggling ring run by Hargrove. He wanted my help to expose it in exchange for a share of the profits. I refused. I told him to go to the authorities, but he laughed, said they'd never believe a butler." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you did not tell me this because—" Julian's jaw tightened. "Because it would implicate Eleanor's family. If I exposed Hargrove, it would ruin Sir Reginald's reputation. Eleanor begged me to stay quiet, and I couldn't refuse her." Hastings scribbled furiously, his mind racing. So Blake was planning to blackmail Hargrove, not just Langston. "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice low. "Blake, he saw the statuette as his salvation, but he cast his net too wide. Langston killed him to silence his demands. But there is another question. What was this proof he held?" Poirot turned to the door as Sir Reginald entered, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Monsieur Poirot, I've just spoken with Beatrice. She's admitted to more thought she was protecting me, but she's brought shame on us all." Poirot's expression softened. "Sir Reginald, your wife's actions, they were born of love, however misguided. But these letters, may I see them?" Sir Reginald handed over a small bundle of papers, their edges worn. Poirot scanned them, his eyes gleaming as he read a passage aloud. "The crane must be delivered by October 10th, or the truth will be known. Payment ensures silence. This, it is signed by Hargrove but addressed to Blake." Hastings gasped. "Blake was blackmailing Hargrove directly?" "Oui," Poirot said. "And Hargrove, he used Lady Beatrice as a conduit, knowing her desperation to maintain appearances. But Blake, he grew bold, threatening to expose the smuggling ring. Langston, aware of this through his own dealings with Hargrove, acted to protect himself, and perhaps others." The door opened again, and Dr. Grayson appeared, his ruddy cheeks pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I must confess, I knew more about Hargrove than I admitted. He approached me last year, offering to sell rare artifacts. I refused, but I suspected his dealings were shady. When I overheard Blake in the village, I realized he was in deep, too deep." Poirot's gaze was sharp. "And you said nothing, Doctor, because you feared your own connection to Hargrove would come to light?" Grayson nodded, his shoulders sagging. I didn't want to be dragged into it. I thought silence was safer. Poirot rose, his voice firm. Silence. It is the accomplice of crime. Blake's greed led to his death, but your silence, and that of others, allowed the shadows to grow. The statuette, it was a catalyst, exposing the frailties of all who touched it. As Grayson left, head bowed, Hastings turned to Poirot. So that's it then. Blake was blackmailing Hargrove. Langston killed him to cover his own tracks, and Lady Beatrice and Grayson kept quiet to protect themselves. Poirot nodded. The threads, they are woven together. The note, the petal, the candlestick, all pointed to Langston. But the deeper truth, it lies in the greed and fear that bound this house. Hargrove's smuggling ring. It is a matter for the authorities now. Our work here, it is done. Sir Reginald's voice was heavy. What happens now, Poirot? My family. We're broken. Poirot's eyes softened. You rebuild, Sir Reginald. With truth, with time.
Scars of the tragedy lingered in the hearts of those within. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his small suitcase at his feet, his patent leather shoes gleaming as always. Captain Arthur Hastings, beside him, adjusted his hat, his notebook tucked safely in his coat pocket, filled with the chronicle of a case that had unraveled secrets as intricate as the ivory statuette itself. The murder of Mr. Gordon Blake and the theft of the priceless crane had been solved, yet the resolution brought not triumph, but a quiet melancholy. The guests had gathered one final time, their faces a gallery of exhaustion and resolve. Sir Reginald Ashbourne stood by the staircase, his posture rigid, but his eyes softened by a newfound understanding. Lady Beatrice beside him held his arm, her face pale but composed, the weight of her confession lifting slightly with time. Eleanor Ashbourne and Julian Carver stood close, their hands entwined, a silent promise of support in the days ahead. Mrs. Clara Whitmore lingered near the door, her notebook closed, her writer's curiosity tempered by the gravity of the truth. Dr. Lionel Grayson, his glasses polished, stood apart, his silence a testament to his shame. Miss Sylvia Trent and young Timothy stood near the French windows, the boy's eyes brighter now, though still shadowed by what he had witnessed. Poirot addressed the group, his voice clear and measured. Mesdames et messieurs, the case of Ivory House is closed. Monsieur Langston, he has paid for his crime, and the statuette, it will return to its rightful place. But the lessons of this night, they must not be forgotten. Secrets, they breed darkness, and truth, though painful, is the only path to light. Sir Reginald stepped forward, his voice steady. Monsieur Poirot, your clarity has saved us from further ruin. We are in your debt, though the cost has been great. Poirot inclined his head. Sir Reginald, the debt is to the truth. You and Madame Beatrice, you must rebuild with honesty. The statuette, it was a false idol, but your family, it is real. Lady Beatrice's eyes glistened. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I will try to make amends. Eleanor approached, her voice soft. You saw through us all, Monsieur Poirot. Julian and I will be stronger for it. Poirot's smile was kind. Mademoiselle, love, it is a strength when built on truth. Cherish it. Mrs. Whitmore spoke next, her tone subdued. I've written many stories, Monsieur Poirot, but none as real as this. I'll tell it with care. See that you do, Madame, Poirot replied. The heart, it deserves respect.
Dr. Grayson cleared his throat, his voice low. I was wrong to stay silent, Poirot.
Thank you, Poirot. Crouched to the boy's level, his eyes warm. Mon petit, your courage, it was the spark that lit the truth. Be brave always, and the shadows, they will not touch you. As Timothy smiled, Poirot rose, adjusting his coat. Hastings, mon ami, the car awaits. London calls, and our work here, it is done. They stepped into the hall, where Peters, the assistant butler, waited with their coats. Hastings glanced back at the guests, their figures framed by the grand staircase. It's a sad business, Poirot, he said quietly. They're free of Langston, but the wounds remain. Poirot nodded, his expression solemn. The wounds, they heal, Hastings, but the scars, they remind. The statuette, the chrysanthemum petal, the candlestick, these were but tools. The true crime, it was in the heart. Greed, fear, silence. Yet from such darkness, the human spirit, it rises. They stepped outside, the gravel crunching underfoot as they approached the waiting car. The manor loomed behind them, its windows catching the fading light. As the car pulled away, Hastings looked at Poirot, whose eyes were fixed on the horizon. What now, Poirot? Another case? Poirot's moustache twitched, a spark of anticipation in his gaze. Always, mon ami. The world, it is full of puzzles. And Hercule Poirot, he is never idle. But for now, let us rest. For the little grey cells, they have earned it. The car rolled down the drive, leaving Ivory House to its quiet recovery. Its secrets laid bare, its future uncertain, but hopeful. The mystery was solved. But the story of those within, as Poirot knew, would continue to unfold.